I remember going and telling the group CEO at the time was Gerald, and I told him, you asked me for a challenge, this is the thing. And I'd worked out, and I told him, well, we're going to spend 100 million. They nearly burst the gasket. You can imagine the board. I said, yeah, okay, fine. So he said, anyway, for a year. I said, no, it's in 3 months.
East African Breweries Limited came calling.
Yes.
EABL.
Yes. So I went to be the marketing director.
At EABL?
Yes.
Okay.
It wasn't EABL then, it was more strongly KBL.
KBL.
Yes.
Kenya Breweries Limited.
Yes.
So, from a marketing perspective, what made you think you could still do this? I mean, FMCG,
that was a challenge.
Yeah, like this.
That was actually the biggest challenge, more than anything else. It was that concept of saying, I've been doing marketing for nice, safe, lovable, very lovable products. I mean, you might say Omo has done what to your hands, but it's still a lovable product. Yes. You could do that, There's Royco, perfect. There's this, they were all lovely, warm, fuzzy feeling. Now you go to the brewery, and at the time I'd gone there, they just had that bad Smirnoff experience, which was a challenge.
What?
But the bigger thing is, the illicits were at their all-time high. That is when every week there was an article in the newspaper, people going kumi, people going blind, others dying, and all those type of things. So it was a time you're going, that's a time they'd had the scandal on a promotion that had gone wrong, and all those type of things. So that's what presented the challenge for me, to sit down and say, my goodness, throw yourself straight in the deep end. Yeah. And then I've always had this relationship with alcohol in very many ways. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, only my very good friends know that I started drinking very, very late in life.
Yes.
I dabbled, taste, but it was never something of interest for me. Because the truth is, and this is where when you get to this age, you start being honest and you start being candid. My father was an alcoholic and he died from liver cirrhosis. So,
whoa.
So for me, alcohol and I were like, whereas I understood it, I respected it, I see all that, but I needed to get to a place where I would be comfortable and have a comfortable relationship and understand the role it plays in society and what it does, just like anything else, just like sugar, right? And so for me, one of the biggest tasks also was driving the responsible drinking agenda, right? When I went in. So that's when we really built on the responsible drinking agenda, really started driving the Diageo marketing code, which is around how you advertise. That's the time we created all those things. And it was part of this agenda of saying that actually you can celebrate life responsibly. There is a value. There is an absolute value to everything. And that's why I start drawing the arguments and saying, you do know if you take too much sugar, it's not good for you.
Yep.
You have to eat sugar, right? If you eat fast food all your life, doesn't matter how much you like it, it's not good for you. And it's the same thing with alcohol. How do you make it something that is treated with respect, just like you treat any other food or beverage with respect? Yeah.
I have so many questions. There's so much you've said that's of such. Okay, what you've shared about your father being an alcoholic, and then you going into the job where it is your okay. So
he just died, by the way. That was even tougher. I joined a year after he died, so it was always that question around how do you go, but it wasn't really never asked overtly, but in my head I was also thinking, oh, what are people going to think, but nobody really, in those days we didn't talk, these things had so much stigma.
Yes.
It's like going, a therapist, now you go to a therapist is nothing. If somebody's got mental health, you talk about it. If somebody has got an alcohol, you talk about it. But those days you never used to talk about it. And remember, my father was one of the most pleasant people, nicest, most charming, most wonderful person. But, that is what happened.
Wow.
And I needed to understand alcohol. And why I really needed to understand alcohol more than anything else is because I remember when he first had his first liver failure, something, went to see a doctor, and a doctor says, you shouldn't drink, liver rebuilds itself, rebuilds. A liver actually can regenerate itself if you stop. After a while and whatever. That was fine. So then he went on his own, and when he came back, because I always used to take him or with my sister or with, one other family member or whatever. And I came and he's having a glass of wine. And I'm like, oh, but he's just drinking and having a glass of wine. I'm like, yeah, but I thought the doctor said you can't drink anymore. He said, no. He said, wine is okay. And that's why I didn't understand alcohol. Because for me, I also believe, Kenyans, I don't know if you've met Kenyans who sit down and tell you I've stopped drinking. And then they've got wine. I said, but you're drinking. Oh, no, I did stop. This is wine. Wine is not supposed to be alcohol. And in my head, I actually believe that as well. That, stupid. Yeah. I'll explain to you. I look back on it and how could you be so stupid? But this is what we believe. We believe wine is acceptable. It's not really alcohol. It's fermented juice. It's fermented grapes. So when he says, no, he said I could have wine. I was like, okay, fine. Let me go back. He has another one. I said, but I thought you told him you could have wine. I mean, wine was okay. I said, no alcohol. I said, but it was wine. I'm the one who's having those conversation. And you're like, oh my goodness. You just, these are the things now you look back, you're like, very, very interesting. But anyway, so that's what I did. And it was good.
Did you come in at the time where the South African versus Tusker war?
Yes, so that's what I was running. No, it had finished, but I was now, part of my responsibility was managing the South African business. Yeah, so the SAB brands. So for me, my portfolio was, of course, all the lager and the spirits and the Kenya King, the this, the Smirnoff and all that. Yeah. But I also had the South African portfolio, which in Kenya was Reds and Castle.
Wow.
And part Reds. Of that, Reds grew. Reds did very well. But Castle, it doesn't matter what. And then having those meetings with the South African breweries people where they were saying, you guys are stopping our product, you're cutting it down, and having those fights and saying, no guys, it's nothing. We're doing everything. We're putting it's being distributed along. People just don't want it. They've rejected it. But they would not see it that way. And then we say, but look at Reds. Look at how Reds is growing. Yeah, Reds has been accepted. No, but because you don't have a competitor using it as part of your portfolio mix. No. Castle, it doesn't matter. So you relaunch it. Still, you put it out, it expires out there because Kenyans had rejected Castle completely. Actually, even if you bring Castle today, nobody... You've seen all these new beers that are there. People drink them. Yeah. Bring Castle. There's a psychological block. Completely. So I was doing that. I'm managing them.
And of course they're not understanding because
and then
it's huge.
Yeah, and then I'd also manage the portfolio, our portfolio in Tanzania. Because in the agreement, what happened is in Kenya, we manage the South African portfolio. In Tanzania, they manage our portfolio. And then in Uganda, we fought 50-50 because we're 50-50 market share in that market.
So let me give context to somebody who may not understand what happened. Tusker was there, and then South African Breweries was introducing Castle into our market.
Yes.
And of course, that was going to make Castle a competitor to Tusker.
Yes.
So there was a crazy war that happened.
Yeah. But it was one, people may say there was an unfairness, but there was also a fairness to it. One of the most powerful things that happened was a campaign that was created. I said, Tusker, my country, my beer. Yeah? And that rallied. That's the power of marketing. Yes. When you touch the hearts of people, the patriotism, and say, you know what? This is my country, this is my beer. Brilliant campaign.
Brilliant.
And so everybody owned it and said, actually, So you almost felt like a traitor if you're drinking something that is not from my country and my beer. Yeah. And that is what won a lot of that. And
then what happened at that moment? Then now an agreement was reached. Because if I'm
so when the agreement was reached, it was signed. We said, okay, a lot of value was being thrown away. Imagine how much value everybody was for what? The amount of money wasted, because you're constantly fighting. None of you is growing. None of you is doing it. You're just focused on fighting. So that's why the agreement was brokered. Yeah. And in that agreement, they looked at the different markets. In Kenya Breweries is stronger, so they'll manage your portfolio. In Tanzania Breweries is stronger, so they'll manage our portfolio. In Uganda, we are 50-50. Everybody fights. Right? Everybody continues to fight. That's fine. But we're 50-50, so it's okay. Yeah. And one day you're 48, 50, 52. Next day it switches, but you're 50-50 share in that particular market. And so that's how the agreement was broken.
So in Kenya, Castle was sold by
Kenya Breweries,
Kenya
yes.
Breweries. And then
yeah,
what
we
you
produce it, we produce with whatever, and they had a stake.
Okay.
So they had a shareholding.
But there was no
Kenya
Tusker in SA.
There was. Not in SA. Oh, Tanzania. Yeah. It's Tanzania.
Because in SA, if I'm not wrong, they bought the elephant
logo. No, yeah, they didn't. But it was Tanzania. Remember the markets?
Yes, okay.
East African Breweries is Tanzania, Uganda.
So this is the time that now you're in this mix.
So I was doing that, and fighting with those South Africans half the time was but again, I keep saying those were some of the fun times in the meetings. You go in for the board meeting and they're saying, no, you're cutting us down, and it's collapsing. You say, but Reds is growing. You're like, no, you people are not, you're strangling our brand, and so we're gonna do the same in Tanzania. We're gonna strangle yours because you're not giving. But Tusker was growing, so they'd start holding it back as a payback. Because they felt we were holding. I mean, there was so much drama in those years, but it was so much fun. I must admit, you're constantly, rolling up. Let's get ready. Yeah, let's get ready for the next one. That's why I said it was a challenge. That's part of the challenge.
But the other challenge was government, because now you're not allowed to watershed. Is that what they call it when they say you're not allowed to advertise up until before?
Those are some of the rules that came in, part of the Diageo marketing code and whatever else. They brought those rules. You can't advertise before 8 p.m.
Yes.
You can't have alcohol advertising in the morning. So all the radio shows, you can't be doing alcohol because kids are in a car going to school with their parents and they're, baridi, you can't do any of that.
So Diageo is the one who came up with this?
So it was part of the code that was created. That Mutudo was there and all those other things. That's the time I also started the marketing code. The global one, the advertising standards body, which I got a whole load of other people in the market. We set it up. And I chaired that, got complete code
what was
written.
It called?
Advertising standards body.
Wow.
Set it up with the industry.
Yeah.
And got agency people plus company people. And we set it up. We got people to rewrite. We borrowed the codes from different markets so that we could create our own marketing code for this market. And that was some of the basis we're using also to say, guys, we can create our own standard. We don't want to be managed externally. We can self-regulate. Allow us to self-regulate.
So did you sit down with government to have this regulation conversation?
That regulation conversation will come with when Mutudo comes, when they do this thing, say, but look, we've already built it into our standards. Yeah, advertising standards. These are the rules. These are the things we're going to do. So now, for example, some of the impacts of some of those things, because as you know, I created then at that time the Tusker Project Fame. That particular project, and Tusker Project Fame at the time, which was my last, was it my last or second last, as a marketing director before I transitioned now to general management, because I said my journey was marketing director, and then I'd always said my end game was always to run a business. Right? Let me cut my teeth across all these things, but the challenge would always be to run a business. So my last role then as was the challenge I was given by the board at the time. They sat down, they said, listen, Tusker, we have to make Tusker the number one beer. How do we make Tusker a big number one beer? Give us something that's going to make it a big iconic brand. And I sat down and said, that's the time reality TV was kicking in. All these shows, Big Brother was big time. Then Idols had kicked in and whatever. So I met both of them. Endemol, who used to run Big Brother, and the Idols people sat with them and said, we want to create a property. How could we create this property? Spoke to them, the Idols said, you don't change anything, you don't touch, you can't co-brand, you can't. So I said, anyway, it's not going to work, leave it. Even when I tried to visualize and try to figure out how it worked. But Endemol were a lot more creative. I sat down and said, you know what? They said, fine, you could do it. But I said, but it's going to be our product. It's going to be, we call it Tusker.
Yes.
And can we make it, they were Project Fame. We say, can we make it Tusker Project Fame? They agreed to that. They said, this is what we're going to do. And what I liked about it is because there was going to be other experience. Remember, Idols is only a show. One time you sing. But this, because of the reality element, we could try to sew in some of the messages when people in the house, the living and whatever else. So it was more engaging as a property. If you understood how Big Brother, Big Brother, you're following people life to life. But then we could find ways to sew in, to seed in who the brand is, what it stands for, its values, its impact and everything else. But the second thing that I felt was that as a big brand, this is where impact started coming in, these conversations around impact. As a big brand, how else do you drive impact in a society, right? You're a brand that's consumed in entertainment ways. How do you drive that particular impact? Yes? And part of that was sitting down and saying, imagine when we do the show, the whole industry you can create. The ambition at the time was to figure out if we could get a next big star. Fine, we didn't necessarily achieve that, you know, but there was the other things. Let me tell you, to run that show, the industries you created, microbar, built
I was telling you, I was in Kijiji Records at the time.
Yes.
And I'm a superstar.
Right?
That song was
then
made
I
in
went,
our studio.
yes, so I
Kanji,
went to meet Kanji and we created that do. And I remember going to sit with him there in his office, and say, no, add a bit more of the ping, you know, so that, you know, because mnemonics are very powerful for shows like this. These are the fun things.
No.
That was really
we're
fun.
talking more about this project, but I want to say something.
Yeah.
As a musician, one of the biggest challenges is when the giants, like now the giants of the industry,
yes,
the giant companies in the industry,
yes,
are not spending in the music entertainment.
Yes, they're not.
And the trickle down effect is insane. Have it be Safaricom, have it be Tusker Project Fame. The trickle down effect. You see, I am here telling you about the impact, and I was never on the show, but the impact that it then had on the studio, meaning the finances that then become available for my album and keeping the studio alive so that, you know. So when a show like that is done, it completely changes the industry. The trickle down, and I think it is pivotal for big companies to invest, to do things in sports, to do things in music.
And I was very clear about that because I said that's a future. The future is going to be music. Why can't we create a music industry? Why can't we create all the ancillary things around music that exist? Because a show like that, what does it help? Production.
You're talking about microbar. Let's give an example.
Microbar, for example, lighting, production equipment, sound. But given the contract, he was not able to invest in that, understand that, right?
Wow.
When we look at videographers, you know, videoing live, nobody had that experience. In fact, the Endemol team told me, unfortunately, we're going to have to bring a lot of the South African team. But I said, fine, but you have to have an understudy for every single person so that in the second phase, if this is successful, I want with each show, we keep reducing the foreign and substituting with the local until you get to a point where only the person who's the Super Bowl may be foreign, but everybody else, we have to train local talent to shoot, to produce, to edit, to do all these things. And that's what happened.
You were that involved.
It was very involving. But even by the time I was doing it, I remember going and telling the group CEO at the time was Gerald, and I told him, you asked me for a challenge, this is the thing. And I'd worked out and I told him, well, we're going to spend 100 million. They nearly burst the gasket. You can imagine the board. I said, yeah, okay, fine. So he said, anyway, for a year. I said, no, it's in 3 months. And that was the cost of that show. You know, it's 100 million you spent in 3 months because the scale of the production. Every day, the house you're setting up, all those things, all those people milling around. Yeah. It was incredible. So it was.
But impact-wise,
I think people underestimate what a show like that did to the industry. As I've said, Mike learned lights, learned whatever. All the young guys, all the people who learned about the different art of video, creating videos, shooting, which was, they may have sound management, editing management, lighting, how it works. You know, people doing things, editing first of all. You know, you've got so much content. How do you edit it into a 30-minute? You've shot for a whole day. Identifying people like Ian Bukwa, you know, to be a judge, and all the other judges. What's her name?
Were you involved in choosing those things?
Yeah, all those things. It was all part of it. It was a full-time. Acheng Abura, him and the others, going around to do the auditions around the country. And making sure you shoot all those. But it was so much. I learned so much from that time.
When I talk about impact, I'm like, qua ground. What did that, does an event like that, so I said there's 3 things. There's awareness, brand love, and there's ROI in terms of sales of product going up. Yeah. What does that, a situation like that, how do you go back and tell your bosses whether this was successful or not?
I think the success was very interesting because, I mean, there was also the message you're constantly dealing with the naysayers. who are sitting down saying, you're doing this thing, but you're increasing people alcohol. You're just trying to create alcoholism. You're trying to get people to drink more by dressing it up at this because you're going around the country you're using. So first of all, it allows you to manage messaging and shift people's minds around and sit down and say, some of these things will always be a part of our life. And it's about the responsibility with which we do that. Yeah. But also the fact that everything can have an impact on society. That's a message you're trying to create, right? That it doesn't matter whatever you do, how do you turn it around to have an impact, a positive impact on the society? So that was one aspect. And so the ROI for me was how many people you watch. Mind you, remember, we said, first of all, this show was 1 hour. It has to be at a time when people watch. It has to be after 8 p.m. because that's a watershed period.
Yeah.
Right? In some countries, because of time difference, there was something called 9 p.m. news, which was sacrosanct. Yes. There was no station. They said 9 p.m. news has to happen. Getting them to agree that news could be a few minutes late.
Nothing.
Imagine. They agreed.
Even
Citizen. Citizen. Oshira. No, we've got to get this. Getting them to agree. Then trying to figure out, because it was the first time there was something happening live across all the markets in East Africa. It was live it was live in Tanzania, it was live in Uganda. Yes, it was live. The show every Sunday night was live at 8 p.m.
Oh yes, I remember it was once live in Bomas.
Yes,
it was live.
Yeah, it was always live. You were shooting, when people are there, it was not Burmese. The first year was a house in Muthaiga where we set it up. The second year then they said, listen, we've got this space here, which is our factory, which was like an empty space. Why don't we create this and make it at the brewery instead of renting a house, using or whatever? That's where the second
brewery on Thika Road.
On Thika Road, yeah. But it was live. The show was live. It was live every 8 p.m. and it was shot and shown live in all the markets. The first year we already did Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. The second year we'd gone to Rwanda as well, live.
Wow. So the news would start a few minutes late?
Yeah. You'd have to tell them there's a chance it may be late because it sometimes would overrun. Because remember, it's live. It's happening live. And there's Sheila Mwanyiga and what's the other host?
The guy from...
Gaetano. And they're closing, they're wrapping, the credits are coming, do-do. And meanwhile, the station are saying, we've got to start the news. It has to be at 9 p.m. But that was part of the game. And it grew because of the number of people got to know the brand. It grew because of the awareness of the brand. Then Tusker, everybody got to know Tusker, right? In East Africa, right?
Is that why they agreed then to do season 2, 3, 4,
2,
5,
3,
9,
4,
10?
5. So I did 1 and 2, and then after that I left because that's when I went into general management. I went to run Uganda breweries.
What?
Right? Yeah. So then I handed it over then to the next team to continue.
Okay, let's take a 2-minute break. We come back into Uganda. Hey,
yeah,
Bongela CV. That's what this is. We'll be back in a few.